This is Southeastern 16 presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today we are talking LSU football. The Tigers have a huge game ahead this Saturday at Ole Miss. And anytime we talk LSU, we go to our friend Matt Moscona. He is ESPN Baton Rouge. He's the publisher of LouisianaSports.net. He knows the Tigers about as well as anybody. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Chris. Always good to chat. Thanks.
Hey, what's the vibe, first of all, going into LSU's trip to Ole Miss? Because I don't think it's been the season that we expected. We thought this would be a high-flying offense. People had questions about the defense. I didn't as much. I don't think that some of the people had been paying attention to what Blake Baker has done on that side of the ball. But overall, what is the vibe going into this? And maybe did a little bit of an offensive explosion against Sela, maybe served to correct some of the issues LSU's had offensively.
Well, the vibe is great because LSU's 4-0. And when you lose 5 straight season openers and you're used to having that blemish early in the season, to be 4-0 is a different feeling that LSU's had over the last half decade. So I think most people look at this defense and it has reinvigorated the fan base. I mean, look, LSU's had great offenses, Chris. That 2023 team, and Jay Daniels won the Heisman on a 9-3 football team. And they lost games because they couldn't stop anybody. The Ole Miss game was really the quintessential example of that. LSU went to Oxford, scored 49 points in regulation, and lost. I mean, it was just an absolute disgrace. When you have a defense playing like LSU's is and the talent they have, you're going to have an opportunity to win any game you play. The question about did LSU score in 56 against Southeastern Louisiana, maybe quell any of those concerns. I mean, look, you did what you're supposed to do as a good team against an outmanned FCS opponent. I think if there's anything that you take from it, there was this conversation about Garrett Nussmeier with that torso injury, and was it limiting him? I know nobody watched that football game, and I don't blame you for not watching that football game. But what was evident is physically, Garrett was able to do everything, make every throw, zip, accuracy, timing. So that's the positive to take from that game, not necessarily that they scored 56 against an FCS team.
What have been the issues offensively for them? I mean, I highlighted before the season, anytime you lose 2 first-round tackles to the NFL, I don't know how you don't take some step back. On the other hand, Nussmeier is a first-round talent. I think, their receiving room, I think the depth in particular, I could argue they've got the best one in the league. They've got a pretty fair running attack, too. Has it just been replacing the tackles that has led to some of their issues, or what's it been?
So it's not just the tackles. LSU had 4 offensive linemen drafted from that team a year ago. And the only returning starter was DJ Chester, who was the center. And he's not playing center this year. They brought in Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. So, Chris, you have an entirely new offensive line. You have 5 new starters on the offensive line. And that has been the jumping off conversation for everything about this team since spring. They brought in, as I mentioned, Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. They brought in Josh Thompson, who was a multi-year starter at Northwestern. So they have some guys with experience. And the guys that are the new starters are guys that were top 100 players. You got a 5-star in Weston Davis. You got talent and some experience, which you don't have as 5 guys that have played together a bunch. And so that's created some of the issues offensively. I think it's pretty evident there's communication. There's comfort level playing next to a guy. An offensive line, 5 have to play as 1. And so I think some of the blocking assignments missed, some of that is just rooted in that lack of it's not ability, it's the lack of experience of those guys playing together. So I think as the season goes along, the hope is those 5 begin to play as 1. They get better and better as a unit as the season goes along, and they're much better, say, in November, December than they are in, September right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of a younger bunch compared to some of the better lines in the SEC. Look, Texas has had this issue a little bit too. They're highly rated guys, but you got guys in this league that are class of 2021, and a lot of LSU's guys are 23 and 24 high school grads.
Yeah, look, Weston Davis is a guy I just mentioned who was a 5-star that they flipped from A&M late. He's a redshirt freshman. He's starting at right tackle. Tyree Adams is a 3rd-year player who's starting at left tackle. Again, he was a top 100, top 150 guy from New Orleans, super athletic, and has been good. Paul Mabinga is starting at left guard. He, is another young guy who started last year for the last 5 games of the season when they had an injury at left guard, so he's got a little bit of experience. But it's not an inexperienced group either, Chris. I mean, Braylon Moore was a 2-year starter at Virginia Tech, was all conference. Josh Thompson from Northwestern started at right tackle for a season, started at guard for a season. So he's a versatile guy that could play guard or tackle. I mentioned Mabenga, who made the 5 starts a year ago. So this is a group that's talented and has some experience. And it's really just a matter of those guys learning to play together as a unit. And, I think part of the reason you saw some of the offensive struggles against Clemson and Florida were, Brian Kelly's acknowledged this, whether you believe it or not, is up to, I guess, the individual. But he said, they knew as a coaching staff what they had defensively and that they were going to be able to play defense and field position. And you have a 5th-year senior quarterback who they were trusting to manage the game and not put them in a bad spot. And they knew they could win a game sort of in a different manner. And I think that's part of why you didn't see LSU take a lot of chances against Clemson and Florida, because they knew with those 2 defensive lines, with all the NFL talent that Clemson and Florida have at the defensive line, that could have been the one game wrecker. Right? That's the thing that if you're really dropping us back 5-7 step drops and you're sitting there trying to push the ball down the field and strip, sack, scoop, score, those are the types of plays that can change the outcome of a game, and they were just not going to let that happen. I think as they move throughout the conference schedule, they're going to have to be a little more aggressive offensively. You did see some of that last week.
Yeah, the defense has been interesting to me, Matt, because Blake Baker, like anybody that's not paying attention, year 2 under him, you figured getting Perkins back and presumably healthy, adding him to Weeks would be a big boost for them. Now, look, I don't know that they have, and this is a really high bar, so I'm not putting these guys down. But when you look at LSU's defenses on elite teams, it's guys we're going to be first rounders in your secondary and on your defensive line. Now, look, they may end up getting there eventually. That was my question, but it feels like they've really answered both those areas really well.
When you spend $18 million on a roster, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, Chris, is that when you look at the transfer portal, we were at SEC Media Days in Atlanta in July, and I always go to that event with kind of with an idea of, I know the team I cover deep, but have a surface level knowledge of the rest of the league. And I think that's the case for everybody that goes. So I go with the objective, let me see how much more I can find out about every other team in the league. And one of the things that I knew I was going to have to convey when people, because I'll do on the day LSU goes to Media Days, I'll do 50 interviews that day. And I knew I was going to get asked the question you just asked me about the defense. But I also knew most people have no idea what LSU did in the transfer portal. I could say, I think some people may know the name AJ Halsey. Now, do you know,
Houston had 5 picks a year ago.
AJ Halsey was first team all conference, led the Big 12 in interceptions, and is a total stud. He was the number 30 overall player in the portal, regardless of position. Most people don't know that name. Last year, Sage Ryan was playing safety at LSU, and he was not good. It was quite literally the worst safety play that I've seen in my time covering LSU. It was atrocious a year ago. And they knew they had to go address it. So they got Halsey. They added Tamarcus Cooley, who was a freshman All-American and all-conference at NC State last year. They went and addressed it. Mansour Delane was a multi-year starter at cornerback at Virginia Tech, who might well be a first-round pick this year. It's at every level of the defense. I mean, they went and added Patrick Payton, who's got 40 career TFLs from Florida State. Jack Pyburn, who comes in from Florida as a 3-year starter. Jamari Butler, who's a 6-year player, was an end at Nebraska. Bernard Gooden, who many people probably don't know that name, but he's a disruptive dude on the interior who started his career at Wake Forest and went to South Florida, and now he's at LSU. I know it's not a lot of names people know, but LSU went and got 4th, 5th, 6th year guys on the defensive side of the ball who have all played in 30, 40 career college games that were super impactful guys that all wanted to come win. I mean, the expectation for this defense is that they're going to be one of the best in all of college football. And it's certainly, my quote unquote bold prediction for this team in our website, we were asked to do that before the season. And it was that for the first time since 2017, LSU would have a top 20 total defense and nationally in total defense. They have studs, Chris. I mean, they have studs, and that's not even counting Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks, who's a preseason All-American. Like they are loaded at every level of that defense. They are talented, veteran, deep, and they are going to be hell for every offense they play this year. It's a lot of fun to watch.
No, I think you just hit it because I looked and like on paper, they had a lot of really good additions. Jack Pyburn from Florida being one of them. Peyton was probably the headliner, right? He's a kid that's gotten some preseason first round type grades. But Halsey and Cooley were guys that made a lot of plays at their former stops. But when the all SEC teams came out, they weren't getting any love. I don't know if people weren't paying attention or they just thought, hey, bump up from the American and the ACC to the SEC. It's just not going to wash. But I mean, I think you just nailed it. And the is it Delane from Virginia Tech? Is that how you pronounce it?
Mansour Delane.
Yeah. I mean, he was the guy that maybe won them the Clemson game. Like, I think people kind of slept on their parts.
Mansour Delane has been the highest graded. I don't know if you look at Pro Football Focus, but he's the highest graded defensive player on LSU's team through 4 games from Pro Football Focus. And you talk about the preseason all conference, whatever. Look, I go to media days every year. There's roughly 1,200 credentialed media members. I think 150 maybe or 200 actually bothered to fill out their ballot. And most people go to that and they really don't know, Chris. They sometimes I voted on that thing. Sometimes you don't know. And so you just default to like what players were brought to media days. And if you need an extra lineman, the South Carolina guy that came, write his name down. It's like, I mean, we've seen some of the AP voters get in hot water this year for some of the decisions they made, notably the Florida State-Alabama fiasco a few weeks ago. But look, man, or I'm sorry, it was the Florida deal a few weeks ago. But anyway, the point being, I don't really care about all the all conference teams and all that sort of stuff. The bottom line is, this was a pretty interesting inflection point in LSU football, where they struggled with NIL from the onset. They struggled to fundraise. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, dating back to 2021 until what happened last fall, when there were several different factors that unfolded. They kind of became liquid. They became cash rich in their collective. And then Bryce Underwood flipped. And all the money that they had tied up and committed to Bryce Underwood, they were able to dump into that portal class. So it was this interesting sort of pivotal inflection point, this moment in time that allowed them to go dump the cash they did in the transfer portal. And they realized, look, you got a 5th-year senior quarterback who might be the best quarterback in the SEC, one of the best in the country. Let's go all in behind him to see if you can win a national championship. It's the same thing Ole Miss and Ohio State did a year ago. It's just that Ole Miss choked in 3 games they had no business losing and didn't make the playoff. Ohio State really struggled to find themselves a lot of last year, Chris, if you remember. I mean, there was the narrative around Ohio State last year was Chip Kelly. He hasn't quite figured out this offense with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard, and you got all this talent, but it didn't really look like it was fluid. And then when it did, kaboom, and they ended up winning a championship, but they still lost 2 games. I just think we all as fans, and we're all fans, like, of the sport, we need to reprogram how we approach a season, because with the transfer portal and the way that rosters are built now, and especially now with expanded conference schedules, I think the days of just seeing teams that are just dominant, running roughshod over everybody with an undefeated season, I just don't think we're going to see that anymore. If we do, it's just going to be a real outlier.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that. In my observation, what has happened is we have pulled the middle up and even the bottom up in, like, especially in the SEC. I don't know if it's caught up at the Big Ten yet. And this is what the rest of the world doesn't recognize. Like, the bottom, like, if you don't show up, Kentucky is the worst team in the league, but they could beat you on any given Saturday right now, just because defensively they've been pretty good. And I think the top has come down. I think the days of Georgia and Alabama, just running away with it. And LSU's done that at times, right? With Joe Burrow. I feel like, to me, those days are over, and the lower tier programs have gotten competitive to where if you get them in your yard, or you go and play in their yard on a Saturday, you don't know what's going to happen anymore.
Is there any better example than Vanderbilt?
No.
I mean, Vanderbilt, not only in the SEC, in all of college football. I mean, Vanderbilt's been a laughing stock. I don't know that there's any other way to say it, Chris. I know you know way more about that program than I do, but historically, they haven't even attempted to compete with respect to resources until now with the renovation of the stadium. What was it? 1980 was the last renovation of that stadium. I mean, they haven't even tried to compete. Well, you get the right guy in there, get a little bit of a commitment with a plan to say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go sign JUCO and FCS guys that are 23, 20, go get old guys.
Yeah.
And it's worked. My goodness. I mean, I don't know that they're going to win a national championship, but they're certainly going to a bowl. I mean, they could be an 8-9 win team. I mean, this is Vanderbilt. I mean, it's the expectation that hasn't existed there, but that's what this era will do. Is it has allowed, I think the way you said it is right, the bottom and middle to pull themselves up. And I also think it's interesting that the people in the teams programs in this era that are most affected are historically relevant programs, maybe that had fallen on hard times, that have had motivated boosters that have allowed themselves to buy their way back to relevance. Florida State, Tennessee. I would put Nebraska in that mix as well. They're still trying to figure it out, but they have the commitment on the roster to try to do it. And then Texas Tech, SMU. And I'm for it. I mean, I think it's a rising tide. Yes, let's get a better product across the board. I think it's a great thing for college football.
Yeah, absolutely. The product is better than it's ever been, without question, and it's going to get better, especially with the schedules next year. Let me pay a couple bills quickly. I'm going to ask you two questions on your way out. I know you got a busy day, and I don't want to take more of it than I need to. I want to talk about the concerns in the matchup with Ole Miss, and also just health report. I'll get updates from you on that. Before we get there, we are presented by GameTime SIDEKICKS, which makes this beautiful LSU National Championship mug, officially licensed stainless steel drinkware, all SEC schools, 350 other universities, stainless steel sippy cups, tumblers, 40-ounce bottles, and shaker cups. SE16 gets you 20% off your entire order at GameTimeSidekicks.com. ROKFORM makes the world's strongest magnetic phone case. ROKFORM is how you spell that. Extreme protection, super strong magnets, and Rock Lock secure mounting. And September is the busiest month of the year with the new iPhone release, so be sure and get your new case for that at rockform.com. SEC25 gets you 25% off your entire order at rockform.com. We're also brought to you by HOVI Dry Goods. And look no further than HOVI Dry Goods for your new favorite hat. You get a great fit, unique designs, high-quality headwear. The bad beat team of the week was Auburn. The Tigers you may have heard, Matt, got a bad call or two against them last week, allegedly, in that loss at Oklahoma. Speaking of which, that might be your bad beat team of the week next week, might be Sooners with the John Mateer news. But anyway, for this week, it is Auburn. That gets you 15% off your entire order at HOVIDryGoods.com. For you out there listening and not watching, that is HOVI is how you spell that. So, all right, Matt, health report for LSU. What does it look like going into Ole Miss?
Yeah, they've stayed mostly healthy. And one of the good things about it, look, every SEC schedule has landmines all over it. But one of the good things about the way the SEC schedule shaped out this year for LSU, Chris, is they avoid back-to-back road conference games so that at any point on the schedule. And then before every game you would look as their quote-unquote more difficult games, they have like a relative layup or a breather. So, for example, last week they played Southeastern Louisiana before they go to Ole Miss. Well, they held Trades Green out, who'd been dealing with an MCL issue. For those that don't know, he's the former basketball player. He's a 6'7" tight end. He's a total freak. Had the game-winning touchdown catch against Clemson. So he's healthy and good to go. West Weeks had injured one of Witt's brother, one of their starting linebackers, injured his calf against Florida. And Brian Kelly said, look, if it was a championship game, he would have played, but they were able to hold him out last week. So he's a full go and ready to go against Ole Miss. The one injury, two that are probably worth watching. One is LSU starting running back Caden Durham. A little bit of an ankle sprain. They said it's not a high ankle. He's a little day-to-day. I think he's going to go. How effective will he be? That'll be interesting to watch. And the other one is Gabe Relaford, who is in the rotation at defensive end. They rotate four guys, the three transfers we talked about, and then Relaford. And Relaford hurt his shoulder, and it might require surgery. He's out this week, and it may require surgery, which would put him out even longer. But that does have them down a body at defensive end. But really, just Durham and Relaford are the only two that are kind of worth watching this week.
Yeah, that's not a bad place to be compared to a lot of teams in the league so far. So, what do you think about the matchup with Ole Miss? I mean, I guess you don't know which quarterback you're going to see. Feels like the defense there is leaked at times. It's gotten better in recent weeks. Lane Kiffin, same thing LSU did, bringing a lot of dudes in the portal, and the offense feels like it's kind of a plug and play, even though they lost a first round quarterback. They've got two who are pretty talented.
I was very skeptical on Austin Simmons. I was very skeptical on the entire league at quarterback before the season started. In July we're at media days, and a lot of the narrative there, Chris. I don't know. Were you in Atlanta for media days? I don't know if I remember seeing you.
I wasn't. I did watch a lot of it on TV.
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of the narrative was, is this the best quarterback year since 2013? Now, I believe 2013 is the best quarterback year ever in the SEC. You had Manziel coming off his Heisman year. A.J. McCarron had won back-to-back national titles. Aaron Murray was a 3-year starter who left with every record in the history of the league. You had Connor Shaw, who won 11 games at South Carolina. The other James Franklin at Missouri. Dak was at Mississippi State. Mettenberger was at LSU. It was loaded. I mean, it was, I think, the best year ever for quarterback in the SEC. And there was a lot of conversation like that. And my point was, can we pump the brakes on Arch, who's had 95 passing attempts, and Lenora Sellers, who couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat for half of last year, and Lagway, who only played one road game, and was at 2-10 Florida State. His numbers actually mirrored Michael Van Buren's. He had as many interceptions as touchdowns. Can we just wait and see on something? There's great upside, I think, with a lot of these guys. And I thought Austin Simmons was in that boat as well. We all saw the impressive touchdown drive against Georgia when he came off the bench for Jackson Dart. We're like, oh my God, he's amazing. Or maybe it was one drive and you caught Georgia a little flat-footed. But anyway, I think we're going to see Trinidad Chambliss this week. He's been more effective running that offense, and if Simmons is limited, I just think that's the direction that they're going to go. I look at this game, and I'm really bullish on LSU in this game, Chris. And to be very candid, I picked Ole Miss to beat LSU last year. They were the better team. They should have won the game. They choked it away. I mean, LSU didn't have a lead until the final score in overtime. And that was a problem for Ole Miss a year ago. And I've got a really good finger on the pulse of this series. I look at a couple things. Ole Miss a year ago was all in to win a national championship. And they spent in the portal. And they had Walter Nolan and Princely Umanmielen and Chris Paul and Trey Amos and talent everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And all of those guys are gone. That defense right now is the worst in the SEC against the run. I watched Arkansas go to Oxford and put up 500 yards of offense on that Ole Miss defense. And by the way, a year ago when Ole Miss and Arkansas played, it was a whitewashing. Ole Miss just skull dragged them all over the field. I do not think that Ole Miss defense is good, and I think LSU has athletes all over the field, and they're going to move the ball and score. On the flip side, we talked about LSU's defense already. I'll be curious about, listen, I think Lane Kiffin's a great offensive coach. And I think, especially at the beginning of games, how he scripts offense at the beginning of the games, he's outstanding. So I wouldn't even be surprised if Ole Miss had some early success offensively. But I have a theory. I'm not saying I believe this hard and fast, Chris, but I think this weekend maybe might prove it or disprove it. I look at Trinidad Chambliss, who's been very good, right? Last week against Tulane, 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing. That had been done in like 50 years at Tulane. But look at Chambliss as a guy that was at Division II Ferris State, comes to Ole Miss, enters the game in the middle of the game against Arkansas. Okay, so nobody's seen this guy play. He's been at a Division II school. And Arkansas, as we saw, is atrocious defensively. They blew an 18-point lead to Memphis. So he has success against Arkansas. Then he gets to play Tulane. Okay. This is a completely different animal that he's going to face this week with this LSU defense. You have pros at this LSU defense is reminiscent of what Ole Miss had defensively a year ago. And now LSU's had 2 weeks of game film on him. The element of surprise is not there. And I don't believe there's a great receiver like they had with Trey Harris a year ago. I think they're okay at running back. I don't think they're great. And I think LSU is great, not good, great at every level of their defense this year. Like Ole Miss was a year ago. I don't know that I think this is like a 2-3 touchdown, like a blowout game, but I do think this is a game, Chris, where LSU is a much better team. And it's kind of like big brother putting their hand on little brother's head, keeping him at arm's length. So even though they're swinging, they just never get close enough to clip you. I think that's how this game goes. I think it's probably a 20s to upper teens game, maybe like a 24-17, a 28-20 type game. But I do think LSU wins, and probably it feels way more comfortable than what the final score is going to show.
Yeah. Got a lot of thoughts on that one. Wish we had a little more time than we do today. It feels, I'll just sum it up like this. It feels like Lane Kiffin, like the analytics loved him, but it feels like they have done that against the teams that they overmatch. When they run into teams with better athletes, they have been much more ordinary in his tenure. So
I think that's fair, and I think this is a great illustration of that. It's never easy to win on the road in the SEC. I'm never going to diminish that and the challenges there. But I think LSU's already been tested already with two pretty significant opponents and going at. And I understand Clemson and Florida's records aren't great right now, but there's talent all over the field on both those teams. And part of the reason their records are what they are is because LSU beat them.
Matt, thanks for joining us today. Tell folks where they can find your great coverage of LSU.
Yeah, thanks. I would say if you can spell my name, you can find me. But I host radio every weekday in Louisiana, all over. 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge, 104.5ESPN.com. I host Locked On LSU podcast. So if you love podcasts, YouTube, or podcasts, then really appreciate it if anybody would check out LouisianaSports.net. We have great coverage of Tigers, Saints, Southeastern Conference, so lots of good stuff there.
Matt, thanks for joining us. We'll catch up with you again later in the football season.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Chris.
All right, he's Matt Moscona of all those things he just said, and there are lots of them. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for watching Southeastern 16 presented by FanDuel.